Why did the shooting start so suddenly? No one had even heard them coming. The first bullets ripped through the cracked concrete like thunder splitting the sky. Dust rained down from the ceiling as 6 men threw themselves against the walls, hearts pounding in their ears. Radios hissed, voices overlapping in panic, the chaos just shy of breaking into full-on desperation. The house they'd taken shelter in was barely standing, a shell of broken windows and crumbling door frames. Not cover, not really, not against this many rifles. Every shot from outside seemed to rattle the entire structure, splintering wood, chipping stone, chewing through the little safety they had left. Chief Petty Officer Harris crouched low, sweat running into the blood soaking through his sleeve. He pressed his back against the wall, feeling the thud of impacts on the other side. The smell of gunpowder mixed with dust was sharp, choking. He forced his breathing slow. He was the chief. He had to stay steady. "We're pinned down," he barked into the radio, voice tight with strain. Static hissed back. Then the reply, scratchy, distant, a calm voice that sounded so far away it could have been on another planet. "Native ETA too long, hold position." Hold position. Harris clenched his jaw until it ached. Holding meant bleeding. Holding meant waiting to die. Across the room, Petty Officer Alvarez reloaded with shaking hands. He was the youngest, barely 22, and his mouth kept opening like he was going to speak but didn't dare. Finally, he whispered, almost like a child asking if monsters were real. "Chief, we're not getting out of this, are we?" Harris didn't answer right away. He could have lied, could have said they'd be fine, but every man here deserved the truth. "We hold," he said at last, voice flat. "That's all we can do." He didn't add the part that sat heavy in all their chests. Holding probably wouldn't be enough. Outside, the militants were regrouping. Harris could hear them shouting in their language, boots crunching against gravel as they moved into new positions. These weren't amateurs. They were organized, moving to flank. He felt it in his gut. The next wave would be worse. And then, somewhere barely a mile away, a girl named Emily sat cross-legged on the floor of the university library, blissfully unaware of the gunfight choking the life out of 6 American operators on the other side of town. She was 19, freshman. Her legs were sore from sitting too long, a textbook open across her knees. The world she knew was made of deadlines and cafeteria lines, not muzzle flashes and dying men. But war doesn't always wait for soldiers. Sometimes it comes for the ones who never signed up. The first distant shots reached campus like faint cracks of fireworks. No one paid attention at first. Then more, faster, closer, until students froze mid-sentence, confusion turning into wide-eyed fear. Someone screamed. Then the whole library erupted into chaos. Chairs scraping, bags dropping, students scattering for cover. Emily stood there a moment longer, heart hammering, her book slipping from her hands. She could hear shouting now outside, running feet, the staccato rattle of automatic fire that didn't stop. She ran to the nearest window and saw smoke rising from the old concrete district. The neighborhood no one went to after dark. Then she saw them. Shadows moving between buildings, rifles flashing. And in the middle of it, she caught a glimpse of American gear, battered helmets, one man dragging another across open ground under fire. SEALs. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. Something in her chest twisted. She could run like everyone else, hide somewhere safe and wait until the noise stopped. But something else was louder. Her father's voice, not real, just memory from all those weekends at the range. "When everyone else runs, you stand." Her breath caught. "This isn't my fight." But another burst of gunfire snapped her out of it, the sound so close she flinched. No one was coming. No one would reach them in time. She moved before she could think. The abandoned training range at the edge of campus still held one of her father's old rifles, a relic he'd left locked away, more memory than weapon. She sprinted there, lungs burning, her hands fumbling with the padlock. When the case opened, she froze for a second, staring down at the rifle like it was something sacred. Her father had taught her to shoot before she was tall enough to hold steady without him bracing the stock for her. She'd grown up with his voice guiding her breathing, teaching her patience, the stillness it took to hit a target 1,000 yards away. But those had been paper targets. This was war. Her fingers trembled as she loaded the magazine. The metal felt too heavy, too real. She slung the rifle across her back, grabbed the range bag with the spare rounds and ran. Her legs were weak with fear. Her stomach twisted so hard she thought she might throw up. But she didn't stop. Inside the house, the seals were running low. 2 mags left, Alvarez reported, voice barely holding steady. Harris nodded once, make them count. The next attack hit harder. Bullets tore through the doorway, splinters flying. A grenade clattered against the far wall but failed to go off, a dud. They got lucky. This time. And then, just as Harris started to shout orders, it happened. A single crack. Clean. Sharp. So out of place, it felt like the whole battle took a breath. Then another. And another. 3 militants dropped in quick succession. Silence rippled through the firefight, like even the air didn't know what had just happened. Harris risked a look through the shattered window. Movement on the rooftop across the street, a figure lying prone. Not one of theirs, too small. A girl. He blinked, thinking for a second that maybe blood loss was making him hallucinate. But then she fired again. The man aiming at Alvarez crumpled before he could pull the trigger. Whoever she was, she could shoot. Sniper, someone outside screamed in panic. Emily's world narrowed into a tunnel. Breathe. Exhale. Squeeze. Each shot felt like it dragged time into slow motion. Her ears rang. Her hands shook between rounds. But her aim never broke. She didn't let herself think about what the bullets were doing. She didn't let herself think about the faces that went slack when she found her mark. If she thought she'd stop. And stopping meant they died. So she kept shooting. Harris felt the shift immediately. Hoping. The kind that creeps in quietly, like maybe, just maybe, they weren't finished yet. Move, he barked, his voice sharper now. The team shifted positions, covering each other as they broke from the ruined house, sprinting for the alley while Emily carved a path through the chaos, one shot at a time. The militants wavered, some firing blindly, others breaking and running. The balance had shifted. For the first time all day, Harris believed they might live. Emily's shoulder throbbed from the recoil, her cheek bruised against the stock, but she didn't stop until the last man was down or gone. Her rifle finally fell still. And only then did she realize she was crying. This was just the first part of the nightmare. But for 6 men who should have died in that broken house, it was also the first fragile breath of survival. And for Emily, it was the moment she stepped across a line she could never uncross. What do you say to a stranger who just saved your life? Harris didn't know. The street was quiet now, eerily so. Spent casings glinted like dull brass teeth across the ground. Smoke hung low, stinging the air, carrying the metallic tang of blood. The team crouched in the shadow of the next building, catching their breath, checking each other for wounds. Harris scanned the rooftops until he saw her. Still there. The girl. Prone, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of her shoulders. The rifle still hugged to her chest like it might vanish if she let go. Cover me, Harris said, rising to his feet. Chief, wait, Alvarez warned, but Harris was already moving. He climbed the jagged staircase to the roof, each step crunching with broken plaster and grit. His boots felt heavy, like he was walking toward a ghost. When he reached the top, He saw her fully for the first time. She was so young it made his stomach twist. Sweat plastered strands of hair to her face, and her cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. Her hands were still locked on the rifle, fingers white-knuckled. "Ma'am," Harris said quietly, lowering himself to one knee. She startled, her whole body flinching like she expected him to strike her. "You," her voice broke, she swallowed hard. "I wasn't supposed to be here." Harris studied her face. He didn't see a killer. He saw a kid caught in something far bigger than she'd ever asked for. "No one's supposed to be here," he said softly, "but you were, and that saved us." Her breath hitched, her eyes searching his face for something, forgiveness maybe. Down below, the team held their perimeter, watching for movement. "Chief," Alvarez called up, "we need to move before they regroup." Harris nodded, but didn't take his eyes off the girl. "You got a name?" "Emily," she whispered. "Emily," he repeated, like saying it would anchor her here, keep her from floating away into shock. He extended a hand, palm up. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly, she released the rifle and let him help her to her feet. Her knees nearly buckled. Harris steadied her by the elbow. "Come on," he said, "you're with us now." They moved as one through the streets, Harris keeping Emily in the center of the formation, shielded by the rest of the team. Every sound made her jump, a distant dog bark, the clatter of loose metal somewhere. Her head kept swiveling, scanning windows, alleys, rooftops. She wasn't looking for targets. She was looking for faces. Every time she blinked, she saw them, the men she'd shot. She could still feel the rifle kicking against her shoulder, still smell the gunpowder. Her father's lessons had never mentioned this part, the quiet after, the hollow weight sitting in her chest like a stone. Her stomach churned. What if she'd missed? What if one of them had lived long enough to see her, to know it was her finger that ended them? She wanted to throw up, to run, to rewind the last hour and walk back into the library like nothing had happened. But then Alvarez glanced back at her and gave the smallest nod of gratitude, a silent thank you, and something shifted in her chest. She had saved them. She couldn't take that back either. The safe house was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was out of the open and that was enough. The team swept it, cleared corners, then collapsed into silence, backs against the wall, weapons across their laps. Harris sat near the door, his good arm resting on his knee, watching Emily across the room. She sat apart from them, her hands wrapped tight around a canteen someone had passed her. She hadn't taken a sip. "You all right?" Harris asked quietly. She didn't look up, no. It wasn't a complaint, it wasn't even fear, just the simple truth. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Did I?" Her voice cracked and finally she looked up at him. "I killed people. I didn't even think. I just—" She broke off, pressing a fist against her mouth. Harris shifted, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "You think we don't go through the same thing?" he asked. "Every man in this room has had to make that choice. The first one's the hardest. You'll carry it. You're supposed to." "I didn't want this," Emily whispered. "None of us did." Harris's voice was quiet but firm. "But if you hadn't done what you did, 6 families would be getting folded flags tonight." Emily swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the canteen in her hands. The room was silent for a while, except for the steady breathing of exhausted men. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked again. "Chief," Alvarez said finally, breaking the quiet. "They'll come back, they'll bring more. We need to exfil while we can." Harris nodded, "We will." His eyes flicked to Emily again. "But first, we get her out." Hours later, Emily sat on the cold floor, her back against the wall, trying not to fall asleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the night replayed behind her eyelids, the chaos, the gunfire, the faces. But worse than the fear was the question that kept gnawing at her. Would she do it again? Could she? The answer came unbidden, quiet but certain. Yes. And that scared her more than anything else. Dawn came pale and thin, creeping through the cracks in the roof. The team prepped for movement, checking gear, loading mags with hands that moved on muscle memory despite the fatigue in their bones. Emily stood awkwardly by the door, her father's rifle slung across her chest. It felt wrong to put it down now, like it had become part of her. Harris glanced at her as he shouldered his pack. "You keep that close," he said. "You may need it again." She nodded, her jaw tightening. "I'm not a soldier," she said quietly. "No," Harris agreed, "but last night you were exactly what we needed." When they stepped outside, the street was washed in gold light, eerily quiet. Too quiet. Harris raised a fist and the team froze. Emily felt her pulse jump, her body tensing without thinking. Somewhere hidden in that silence, danger was waiting. And this time, she wasn't just a girl from campus. She was the one holding the rifle. Why was it so quiet? That was the question gnawing at Harris as the sun climbed higher, burning mist off the empty streets. The silence wasn't peace, it was waiting. He'd been in too many ambushes to mistake it for anything else. "Eyes up," he murmured, leading the team through the rubble-strewn alleyways. Every step felt too loud. Every shadow felt like it was holding its breath. Emily followed close, the strap of the rifle cutting into her shoulder, her pulse thudding against her throat. Her sneakers were coated in dust now, her hair a tangled mess, but she stayed with them. She didn't ask where they were going. She just moved when they moved. She wanted to believe it was over. She wanted to believe the night before had been the worst of it. But the dread in Harris's voice told her otherwise. They passed a burned-out truck, its frame still reeking of charred rubber. Broken glass glittered in the road like ice. Alvarez glanced back at her once, gave a small, grim smile, then kept walking. Emily tried to mirror his calm, but her stomach was a knot. The first shot came from somewhere above, a single crack that rang off the walls. "Down," Harris barked, and the whole team dropped, rifles snapping to the rooftops. Emily's body hit the dirt hard, heart hammering. Another shot, closer. Shouts echoed from ahead, then the rattle of automatic fire. The quiet was gone now, replaced by the deafening chaos of a fight about to break wide open. "Contact front," Alvarez shouted. Bullets chewed into the wall just feet from Emily's head. Dust stung her eyes as she scrambled behind a broken cart, clutching the rifle so tightly her knuckles ached. Harris's voice was calm, even as rounds snapped overhead. "Two shooters rooftop left, suppress and flank." The SEALs moved like they'd done this 100 times, one laying down fire, the others shifting positions, always covering each other. Emily stayed frozen, chest heaving. "You can stay down. No one would blame you." But then she saw Alvarez sprint across open ground, rounds chasing his heels. Her father's voice echoed in her head again. "When everyone else runs, you stand." Her hands moved before her brain caught up, working the bolt, setting her cheek against the stock. "Breathe. Exhale. Squeeze." The rooftop gunner went down, his weapon clattering against the ledge. Emily barely heard herself gasp. She just worked the bolt again and found the second shooter. The shot broke, sharp and final, and the street fell quiet for a half-second before new fire opened from deeper in the block. "Good shot," Harris barked without looking back. "Stay on it." She swallowed hard, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her sleeve. This wasn't the rooftop anymore. This was closer, louder. And for the first time, she wasn't just covering them. She was fighting with them. The next wave came fast. Militants spilled from doorways and alleys, rifles barking, voices shouting in a language Emily couldn't understand. The SEALs fell into a firing line, picking their targets with clinical precision. "Push forward," Harris called, and they advanced by bounds, two moving while the rest fired, leapfrogging down the street. Emily's legs shook as she followed. She fired when she could, every shot a battle between instinct and terror. Her shoulder throbbed from the recoil, her ears ringing. At one point she caught sight of a boy, couldn't have been older than her, raising his rifle from behind a crumbled wall. Her finger froze on the trigger. She saw his face, saw the fear in his eyes. He hesitated too. Then Harris's shout tore through the air, "Emily, now!" and she squeezed the trigger. The boy fell. Emily's breath caught, the sound leaving her body like someone had punched her. There was no time to grieve. Another shooter, another shot. By the time the last man broke and ran, Emily's cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't even realized had started falling. The street was a graveyard now. Shell casings, bodies, the acrid stink of gunpowder hanging over everything. The SEALs regrouped, checking each other, reloading, wiping grime from their faces. Emily stood apart, her rifle slack at her side, staring at the boy's body. She felt hollow, like the world had been scraped out of her. Harris walked over, his boots crunching against the ground. "You did good," he said quietly. "I killed him," she whispered, her voice breaking. Harris's gaze followed hers, landing on the still form by the wall. His jaw tightened. "You kept him from killing Alvarez," he said. "You kept him from killing me." Emily shook her head, blinking hard. "He was my age," she choked out. "Yeah," Harris said softly. "War doesn't care how old you are." She bit her lip until she tasted blood. When they finally moved again, Emily walked in silence, the weight of the rifle now feeling heavier than it had the night before. The streets felt emptier. Her own footsteps sounded too loud in her ears. But she didn't fall behind. She didn't ask to stop. Something had shifted inside her, something she wasn't sure she could ever undo. She was no longer just the girl who saved them from a rooftop. Now she was part of this, for better or worse. By midday, they reached the edge of the district, a cluster of battered walls and blown-out cars where Harris called a halt. "Hold here," he ordered. The team took positions, setting up security, scanning for movement. Emily sat with her back against the wall, her body vibrating with exhaustion. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, but the boy's face kept flashing in her mind. You didn't have a choice, she told herself. But it didn't make the ache go away. As the sun dipped lower, Harris crouched beside her. "We'll have a window soon to move out of here," he said. Emily nodded without opening her eyes. "You held your own today," Harris added quietly. Emily let out a humorless laugh. "I almost froze." "But you didn't," Harris said. "That's what matters." He studied her face for a moment, then added, "Don't lose that heart, Emily. The day you stop feeling this is the day you stop being human." She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I don't think I could ever stop feeling it," she whispered. "Good," Harris said, rising to his feet. "Then you'll get through this." When night came, the world turned to shadows again. Emily lay awake, staring at the stars through the gaps in the roof, the rifle across her chest like a shield. The boy's face was still there. But so was Alvarez's, alive. So were the others. And somewhere deep under the fear and the ache was something new. Resolve. Tomorrow, if it came to it, she would stand again. Why couldn't she sleep? The stars were bright, the night still, but Emily lay wide-eyed on the dusty floor, the rifle across her chest. Every sound made her tense, a distant shout, the creak of settling wood, the buzz of an insect by her ear. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the day, the boy, the blood, the way Harris had looked at her after she fired. She should feel proud, she had kept them alive. But pride and guilt were wrapped so tightly together that she couldn't separate one from the other. Across the room, Alvarez snored softly. Two of the other men sat by the window, keeping watch, their silhouettes dark against the faint glow of the horizon. Emily turned her head and saw Harris sitting by the doorway, back against the frame, rifle across his lap, awake. Of course he was awake. She pushed herself up, padding over quietly. "You don't sleep either?" she asked softly. Harris glanced at her, then back out into the dark. "Not much," he said. "Because of this." She gestured toward the empty streets, toward the danger that never seemed far away. Harris shook his head. "Been this way for years. You do this long enough, sleep feels like a luxury." Emily sank down beside him, hugging her knees. "My dad, he used to say that too," she said quietly. Harris didn't reply right away, just let the silence stretch until Emily spoke again. "He taught me to shoot, taught me to be calm, said someday it might matter." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "I thought he meant in competition, or maybe hunting. I didn't think he meant this." Harris studied her face, seeing the weight she was carrying. "You think he'd be proud of you?" he asked. Emily swallowed hard. "I don't know." "You saved lives yesterday. Saved more today," Harris said. "Doesn't get much more honorable than that." She turned the words over in her head, but didn't answer. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then fell silent. The hair on the back of Harris's neck stood on end. "Wake the others," he said sharply, already raising his rifle. Emily's stomach dropped. "Now, Emily." She moved fast, shaking Alvarez's shoulder, hissing his name. The others stirred, rifles coming up as Harris scanned the darkness beyond the doorway. And then it started. A single shot shattered the night, followed by a rain of automatic fire. The window exploded inward, glass and splinters spraying across the floor. "Contact!" Alvarez shouted, diving for cover. The house erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouting, the hiss of rounds snapping past. Emily hit the ground, heart pounding, ears ringing. The muzzle flashes outside lit up the night like lightning. "We're surrounded," someone yelled. Harris shouted orders, moving between positions, keeping the team firing in controlled bursts. Emily crawled to the nearest window, pressing herself against the wall. She could see shadows moving outside, ducking between cars, using the darkness as cover. She forced herself to breathe. Breathe, exhale, squeeze. Her shot dropped one of the figures, but there were more, so many more. Harris' left flank, one of the SEALs called too late. A burst of fire tore through the doorway, and Harris staggered, dropping to one knee. "Chief," Alvarez shouted, dragging him back as bullets chewed into the frame where he'd been standing. Emily's breath caught. Harris was bleeding, dark, wet spreading across his shoulder and chest. She felt something snap inside her. Not now. Not after everything. She shifted, dragging the rifle up to the broken window, and started firing. Her world narrowed to the scope, the tunnel of sight that turned the chaos into something she could control. One shot, two, three. Each one clearing space, buying seconds. "Move," she shouted, her own voice startling her, and the team shifted positions, pulling Harris deeper into cover. Emily didn't stop firing until the last of the militants fell back into the shadows, their shouts fading into the distance. Silence crashed over the house like a wave. For a moment, no one moved. Then Alvarez was kneeling by Harris, hands pressed hard against the wound. "Through and through," Alvarez said, voice tight. "He's lucky." Harris grunted, trying to sit up. "Stay put," Alvarez ordered, forcing him down. Emily's hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped the rifle. She backed into the corner and sat down hard, her chest heaving, tears streaking the dirt on her face. Dawn came gray and cold, revealing the damage, broken windows, pocked walls, blood smeared across the floor. Harris was pale but awake, his shoulder bandaged tight. Emily sat near him, knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't slept at all. "You saved me," Harris said quietly. Emily didn't answer at first. "I didn't think," she said finally, her voice hoarse. I saw you fall and—" "You did exactly what you needed to do," Harris said. Emily stared at her hands. They were still trembling, even hours later. "Every time I think I can't do it again," she whispered, "something makes me." Harris nodded slowly. "That's what keeps people alive out here. Not the ones who want the fight, the ones who won't let it take the people next to them." Emily swallowed hard. The boy's face was still with her. But now Harris's was too alive, because she had acted. She realized she was crying again, quietly, but for once it wasn't just from fear. By midday, the team was ready to move. Harris insisted on walking, leaning on Alvarez but refusing to be carried. They couldn't stay. And Emily didn't ask to stay. She picked up her rifle and followed. The world outside felt different now. Sharper, quieter. Every window looked like it might hide an enemy. Every shadow felt like it might move. But she kept her head up, her fingers steady on the trigger guard. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped being just the girl who stumbled into this fight. Now she was part of it. For better or worse. And Harris, wounded but walking, knew it too. That night, when they finally made it to a safer building, Emily sat apart from the team, staring at the rifle across her knees. Her hands had stopped shaking. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad. When Harris finally sat down beside her, the silence stretched a long time before he spoke. "You're changing," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "I'm scared of that," she admitted. "You should be," Harris said. He looked out at the night. "But sometimes, it's the ones who are scared that we trust the most." And in that broken building, under a sky heavy with stars, Emily made herself a promise. If there was more fight coming, and she knew there would be, she wouldn't freeze. Not again. Not ever. When was the last time she laughed? Emily couldn't remember. The safe house was quiet except for the soft rasp of Harris's breathing. His bandage needed changing, and Alvarez was carefully cutting away the blood-soaked gauze. The chief didn't flinch, though his face had gone pale beneath the grime. Emily sat nearby, back against the wall, knees hugged to her chest. The rifle rested across her lap like it always did now, a weight she had started to feel as natural as her own shadow. "You're healing fast," Alvarez muttered, glancing at Harris's shoulder. Harris grunted, "Can't afford not to." The team chuckled softly, the first sound that felt close to normal in days. Emily didn't laugh, but she found herself smiling, just barely, at the way the men teased each other. They made it seem like nothing could touch them, like this was just another bad day in a long string of bad days they'd already survived. But she knew better. She had seen Harris bleeding in the dirt. And she had seen the look in Alvarez's eyes when he thought they might lose him. Later, when the others were catching short bursts of sleep, Emily found Harris sitting alone again, his back to the wall, rifle across his lap. "You should rest," she said softly. Harris glanced at her, then back at the doorway he'd been watching. "Rest is for when they stop coming." Emily slid down to sit beside him. The floor was cold, the air heavy with the smell of sweat and dust. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment. "Sure. How do you carry it?" Harris looked at her, brow furrowing. "All of it," Emily said. "The faces, the noise, the choices you have to make. How do you keep going without," her voice caught, "without losing yourself?" Harris was silent for a long time. "You don't carry it alone," he said finally. "You carry it with the people next to you. And some days, yeah, it feels heavy as hell. But you learn to put it down when you can, to breathe, to laugh when you get the chance." Emily nodded slowly. "My dad used to say that," she said quietly. "About putting it down." About breathing, she smiled faintly. He said the shot isn't just about hitting the target, it's about letting go too. You don't hold your breath forever, you let it out. Harris studied her for a moment. He sounds like a smart man. Emily's smile faded. He was before she stopped blinking hard, before he died. Harris didn't speak, just let the silence settle. He wasn't killed in combat, Emily said after a moment. Heart attack, at the kitchen table, I was 17, she swallowed. We just had a fight about college. He wanted me to go to the academy. I wanted to be a doctor. I told him I wasn't going to spend my life shooting things. And then, her throat closed, and she pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes. I never got to say I was sorry. Harris rested his good hand on her shoulder, steady but not heavy. He'd be proud of you, Emily, he said quietly. You don't know that. I do, Harris said simply, because I know what he taught you, and I've seen what you've done with it. Emily let out a long, shaky breath. I don't feel proud, she admitted. Good, Harris said. That means you're still human. When dawn broke, the team moved out again, slipping through narrow alleys, skirting burned-out cars and blown-open doorways. Emily kept her rifle ready, scanning rooftops. She wasn't as jumpy as before, but she was sharper now. Every sound felt clearer, every movement sharper. She caught things before the others did sometimes. A glint in a window, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. You've got good eyes, Alvarez told her once, offering a tired grin. Emily managed a small smile. Guess I've had practice. Midday, they stopped in a half-collapsed building to rest. The air was hot, buzzing with flies. Alvarez sat down across from Emily, pulling off his helmet and rubbing the sweat from his face. You know what I keep thinking about, he said suddenly. Emily raised an eyebrow. What? My mom's cooking, Alvarez said, a tired grin on his face. She makes this stew with green chili spicy enough to burn your tongue off. I'd kill for a bowl of it right now. Emily blinked at him, then laughed, really laughed, the sound startling even her. It felt strange, almost out of place, but it loosened something in her chest. Your turn, Alvarez said. What do you miss? Emily hesitated, then said, my dorm room. Not because I liked it, it was tiny and smelled like burnt popcorn, but because I didn't have to be scared there. Alvarez nodded slowly. You'll get back there, he said. Emily looked down at her hands. Will I? She whispered. Yeah, Alvarez said, because we're not dying out here, not after what you've done for us. The conversation stayed with her as they moved again that afternoon. The world outside was still hostile, still full of threats, but something in her felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. Like maybe she could carry this a little longer. That night, Harris ordered a full perimeter watch, half the team awake at any given time. Emily volunteered to take the last shift, and when it was finally her turn, she sat on the roof, the rifle across her knees, watching the horizon slowly lighten. The town looked almost peaceful from up here. Almost. But she knew better now. And she knew that somewhere out there, danger was waiting. She didn't want to fight again. But she was ready if it came. When Harris came to relieve her, he didn't say anything at first, just sat beside her and looked out over the rooftops. Beautiful morning, he said finally. Emily nodded. Yeah, she said softly. For a long time they just sat there, letting the silence be enough. And for the first time since it all began, Emily felt like she could breathe. Why did the birds stop singing? Emily noticed it first, just before dawn. She was sitting near the doorway, rifle across her knees, watching the last of the stars fade. It had been a strangely quiet night, no gunfire, no shouting in the distance, just the soft rhythm of boots shifting during watch rotations. And then the silence changed. Too still. Like the whole city was holding its breath. Emily's stomach tightened. "They know we're here," she said softly. Harris, half awake and still stiff from his shoulder wound, looked up sharply. "Gear up," he ordered. Within minutes the team was ready, weapons loaded, packs on. Emily's pulse hammered as she checked her rifle one last time. If they were coming, this was it. They made it 3 blocks before the first shots cracked from the rooftops. "Contact front," Alvarez shouted. Bullets chewed into the wall beside Emily's head, forcing her down. The SEALs returned fire, their movements sharp and controlled, but Harris could see it already. This wasn't a small probing attack. This was an attempt to pin them. "We're getting boxed in," one of the men yelled over the roar of gunfire. Harris keyed his radio. "Command, this is Native. We are under heavy contact and maneuvering toward fallback. Need extraction vector now." The reply came through, ragged with static. "Native, you have 10 mics to reach grid 7 Bravo. After that, we lose your window." 10 minutes. 10 minutes to cross streets already crawling with fighters. Harris swore under his breath. "We move," he barked. "Bounding retreat, stay tight." Emily ran when they ran, dropped when they dropped, heart hammering with every bound. The air was alive with bullets, snapping past her ears, sparking against walls. Her hands worked the rifle almost without thought now, sight, breath, squeeze, dropping a shooter on the corner, clearing a window for Alvarez to move. Somewhere in the chaos, she realized she wasn't just following anymore. She was part of the fight. They made it halfway to the extraction point before the road ahead lit up with fire. More militants, too many. The team dove for cover behind a burned-out vehicle. "We can't push through that," Alvarez panted, glancing at Harris. "We don't have a choice," Harris growled, checking his watch. 5 minutes. Emily peeked around the edge of the car, heart slamming against her ribs. There, a rooftop across the street, with clear line of sight over the kill zone. If someone could get up there. Her stomach clenched. No one said it out loud, but she saw it in their eyes. They all thought the same thing. She was the best shot they had. Harris met her gaze. "You don't have to," he said quietly. Emily swallowed hard. "I know," she said, "but I'm the one who can." Before she could lose her nerve, she sprinted for the side alley, Alvarez covering her with short bursts. The climb up the narrow staircase felt endless, her legs burning, lungs on fire. When she reached the top, she dropped flat, heart racing, the rifle sliding into position like it had been waiting for this moment. Through the scope, the street below came into focus. "Breathe. Exhale. Squeeze." The first shot dropped a gunner behind a barricade. The second took out the man with the RPG. The third cleared the far corner where muzzle flashes sparked. Below, Harris's voice cut through the radio. "Move, move." The team broke from cover, sprinting through the intersection as Emily carved them a path with every shot. Rounds snapped past her position, kicking up dust, but she stayed steady, working the bolt, one breath at a time. When the last man fell, the street was clear for now. Emily scrambled back down, nearly slipping on the crumbling stairs, then hit the street running to catch up. Alvarez grabbed her arm as she slid in behind them, his grin wide despite the chaos. "Perfect timing," he shouted. Emily just nodded, breathless, heart still hammering. The last few blocks were a blur, gunfire, shouted directions, Harris urging them forward even as blood seeped through his bandage. When they finally reached the extraction point, a blasted-out courtyard on the edge of town, the air was already filled with the distant thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors. The sound nearly broke her. Not with fear, with relief. But the fight wasn't done. The militants were closing in from behind, their shouts growing louder. "Defensive perimeter," Harris barked, dropping to a knee despite his wound. Emily took position behind a chunk of concrete, rifle braced. She could see the first shadows moving in the smoke. The helicopter came in low, its downdraft whipping dust into a storm. Alvarez waved them forward, but Harris held until the last possible second. "Go," he shouted. Emily sprinted with the others, ducking low as the bird hovered barely above the ground. Bullets tore into the courtyard as she grabbed the door frame and hauled herself inside. Harris was the last one in, Alvarez yanking him up by his vest as the helo banked hard, climbing away from the kill zone. For a moment, no one spoke. The noise of the rotors filled the space, hot wind whipping at their faces, but it was different now. They were leaving. Alive. Emily sat with her back against the wall, chest heaving, her hands still locked around the rifle. She couldn't let go. Not yet. Harris sat across from her, pale but grinning through the pain. "You did it," he said. Emily shook her head. "We did it," she corrected. Harris's grin widened. "Yeah," he said, "we did." Emily turned her face toward the open door, letting the wind whip through her hair. Below them, the city stretched away, smoke rising, streets still crawling with fighters who were too late now. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily let herself breathe all the way out. And for just a moment, she felt weightless. When the helo finally touched down at the forward operating base, the ramp dropped and the team filed out, battered but standing. Emily followed last, blinking against the sun. It felt wrong to step onto solid ground again, like part of her still belonged up there in the sky, rifle in her hands, fight still raging. But she walked forward anyway. Because whatever came next, she knew she was not the same girl who had dropped her books in the library that morning. That night, as the team sat together in the mess tent, someone made a joke, something about Alvarez's terrible shooting compared to Emily's, and they all laughed. Even Emily. And for the first time, it didn't feel strange. It felt earned. Why did the quiet feel heavier than the gunfire? Emily sat outside the medical tent, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the distant hum of generators. The base was busy, voices calling out, boots thudding across gravel, but all of it felt far away. She'd washed her hands 3 times already, but she still swore she could smell the cordite. Harris was inside the tent, getting his shoulder stitched properly this time. Alvarez had tried to convince her to eat something, but she couldn't. Her stomach was tight, her chest too heavy. The firefight kept playing in her mind, the sound of each shot, the sight of each man who fell. And over all of it, her father's voice. "When everyone else runs, you stand." She stood. But standing came with a price. "Emily." She turned at the sound of Harris's voice. He was pale but upright, his arm in a fresh sling. "You should be resting," she said quietly. "So should you," he replied, sitting down beside her on the low step. For a moment they just sat in silence, the night air cool against their faces. "You saved us out there," Harris said finally, "more times than I can count." Emily nodded once, but her jaw was tight. "You think I'm a hero now?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp at the edges. Harris studied her face. "I think you were what we needed," he said carefully. She turned away, blinking hard. "I killed so many people," she whispered. "You saved so many more," Harris said. "That doesn't make it easier," she said, almost angry now. "It's not supposed to," Harris replied. Later, a man from command came to speak with her, clipboard in hand, voice calm but distant. "Miss Foster," he said formally, "I need a statement about what happened in town." Emily blinked at him, thrown by the sudden formality. "Statement? You engaged in direct action alongside U.S. forces," he said, like he was reading it off a report. "That's not standard protocol for a civilian. We need to document your role." Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So what? I'm in trouble." "No," the man said quickly. But this will go on record. We just need to know exactly what happened." He handed her a pen. Emily stared at the paper for a long time, the words blurring. Exactly what happened. How was she supposed to explain what it felt like to squeeze the trigger and watch someone fall? How was she supposed to explain the weight of standing when everyone else ran? Her hand trembled as she wrote, each word feeling like it carried more weight than it should. When she finished, she set the pen down and slid the clipboard back. The man nodded, thanked her, and left without another word. Emily sat there a moment longer, feeling like the air had gone out of the room. Alvarez found her later, sitting on the steps again. "You did good," he said softly. Emily didn't look up. "Why doesn't it feel good?" Alvarez sat down beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because you're not supposed to like it," he said. "The day it feels good, that's the day you stop being the kind of person worth saving." Emily let out a shaky laugh, wiping at her eyes. "Guess I'm still worth saving then," she said. Alvarez grinned. "Yeah, you are." That night, Emily sat outside alone, looking up at the stars. The base was quieter now. The noise of the day faded into stillness. She thought about the boy she had shot. She thought about Harris, alive because she had not hesitated. She thought about her father, the way he had steadied her hands when she was small, the way he'd said patience was the difference between a good shot and a lucky one. For a long time she just sat there, letting the night be what it was. And then she whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry, Dad." The words caught in her throat. "But I think I finally understand." When morning came, she walked to the armory and found Harris there, strapping on his gear one-handed. "You're moving out?" she asked. "Yeah," Harris said. "Orders came through this morning, different mission." Emily nodded slowly. "I should go home," she said, almost like she was asking him. Harris studied her face, then nodded. "You've done more than enough," he said. "Time to let us carry it from here." Emily swallowed hard. "Will you make it back?" she asked. Harris smiled faintly. "We'll try." He reached out, resting his good hand on her shoulder. "You changed things, Emily. Don't forget that." She watched them load up, their gear rattling, their faces calm in the way only people who had faced death and come back could be calm. When the trucks pulled away, Emily stood there for a long time, staring after them. She didn't cry this time. She just breathed. Back in the quiet of the barracks, Emily packed the few things she had been given, a spare shirt, a pair of boots that still felt strange on her feet. Her father's rifle sat on the bed. She ran her hand over the worn stock, feeling the scratches from years on the range. For a moment she thought about leaving it behind. But then she picked it up, slinging it across her back. Not because she wanted to fight again, but because it was part of her now. And she wasn't ready to put it down. That evening she stood outside the wire, watching the sun set over the horizon. Somewhere out there, Harris and Alvarez were already back in the fight. Somewhere out there, more choices would have to be made, more lives saved or lost. Emily didn't know if she'd ever come back to a place like this. But she knew one thing for certain. If she ever had to stand again, she would. Why did the world feel so normal? Emily stepped off the transport plane, the air warm, the sky impossibly blue. The noise of the base, the hum of rotors and the shouted orders, faded behind her as she walked toward the terminal. Her boots scuffed against clean pavement, no dust, no blood. It felt wrong. Her fingers brushed against the sling of her rifle, now cased, locked, just another piece of luggage, and she felt a pang in her chest. The war had stayed behind, but part of her hadn't. The campus was alive when she returned, students walking in clusters, earbuds in, laughing about things that now felt impossibly small. Emily crossed the quad, her pack on her shoulder, feeling like a ghost moving through a world that had no idea what she had done. No one looked twice at her. No one asked why her eyes kept scanning rooftops, or why her steps never faltered near open doors. Life had gone on without her, and somehow she had gone on without it. Her dorm room was exactly as she'd left it, a stack of books on the desk, a half-empty mug by the window. Emily set her pack down, sat on the edge of the bed, and let out a long breath. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something closer to grief. The room was too quiet, too safe. She closed her eyes and could still hear the crack of gunfire, the thud of Harris's boots, Alvarez laughing in the middle of chaos. She missed them. She missed the weight of knowing that every choice mattered. Days passed, then weeks. Emily went to class, took notes, walked the halls like everyone else. But at night, when the campus was still, she would sit by the window, staring at the stars. Sometimes she imagined Harris and the team under the same sky, somewhere halfway across the world. Sometimes she imagined them gone. And every time, the ache in her chest reminded her why she had picked up the rifle in the first place. One afternoon, she was leaving the library when she heard the sound. A loud crack, sharp, sudden. Her heart jumped into her throat. She turned, scanning the quad, but it was only a car backfiring near the parking lot. Students around her barely noticed. Emily forced her breath slow, but her hands were trembling. She wasn't the same. She would never be the same. That night, she pulled the rifle case from under her bed and opened it. The rifle lay inside, clean, oiled, the stock smooth under her fingertips. She rested it across her lap, her hands steady now. It wasn't about holding on to the fight. It was about remembering what it had cost. Weeks later, an email arrived. No subject line. Just a single line of text. Made it back, Chief's fine, we miss our sniper. Emily stared at it for a long time, her throat tightening. Then she smiled, small but real. The next morning, she walked to the campus range, a place she hadn't visited since before it all started. The smell of gun oil, the distant sound of shots on paper targets, it all came rushing back. She sat up slowly, laid out the rifle, and took her place. Breathe. Exhale. Squeeze. The shot cracked through the still morning air, the round punching a perfect hole through the center of the target. Emily lowered the rifle and stared at the paper, heart pounding. It wasn't joy she felt. It wasn't even pride. It was something quieter. Something like acceptance. She packed up the rifle, slung it over her shoulder, and walked back across campus as the first bell rang. No one noticed her. No one knew. And that was okay. Because she knew. And she knew that when the world needed her again, whether on a rooftop or in the quiet of a library, she would stand. That night, as she sat by the window watching the stars, she remembered Harris's words. The day you stop feeling this is the day you stop being human. She felt it all. The fear, the grief, the weight. But also the quiet, stubborn pride that she had not turned away. That she had carried 6 men's lives on her shoulders and not let them fall. And as the night deepened, Emily whispered to the empty room, almost like a prayer. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.